My story is not the same as the other stories that I've listened to on your channel. I didn't start going to Thailand on holiday and dream of moving there one day. I actually moved to Thailand many years ago to work. I thought I knew Thailand. I gave decades of my life to the country, and I got to a stage where I thought I was able to retire. A series of bad decisions, misguided trust, and the understanding that Thailand was a place that respected and cherished me as a valued expat, I let my guard down and found myself returning to a country that I didn't even recognize. It wasn't that I wanted to go back. It was because that was my only choice in order to survive the harsh reality of retirement going wrong. Thailand gave me so much more than that throughout the years. Yet what I really wanted from Thailand was nothing more than a place to live after putting in years of work. I always thought that by giving decades of my life to the country, I would end up as part of it, a citizen, or at worst, a permanent resident. Yet, at the end of it, I was still doing yearly visa extensions. If I found myself in a position where I was no longer eligible for that visa, 35 years in the country would have counted for nothing, and I would have had to have left anyway. That was something that hastened my decision to leave. But I'm going to start at the beginning and tell you why I fell in love with the country, why I wanted to work there, even though I was earning a lot less money than I would have earned at home. It never felt like it was about the money in Thailand until it was only about the money. They say that money is the root of all evil. I wouldn't agree. Lack of money is the root of all evil. And if you find yourself like me, an individual who thought he was respected and looked up to, the reality hits a lot harder. I've been back in the country I left all that time ago for just under a year. My only solace was that I had a son when I was married in Thailand for the first time. He's already in his mid-20s and decided he wanted to go and live and work in England. He found himself on his feet and he graciously has allowed me to stay at his place. For me, it's a huge fall from grace. It's an embarrassment, and it's the epitome of a life gone wrong. But it serves as a warning on multiple fronts, and that's what it's all about. Firstly, that retirement in Thailand is never guaranteed. Secondly, you can spend decades in the country, and it counts for nothing if you don't meet the stringent requirements for anything better, and you're going to be left holding the bag. Finally, it's about love and desire, and how it can rip away everything you've worked for. You allow things to be ripped away because you don't think that they're being ripped away. You think you're doing everything right, even though you're not. So I will start this off by saying in 1989, as a 26-year-old from England, I found myself in Thailand for the trip of a lifetime. The only thing that was different between me and the people I went with was that I didn't want to return home. So I didn't. I just stayed and made Thailand a bigger part of my life. I didn't think that by doing that my future would be in jeopardy. I did think by doing that I would have a better life and a better existence in a place where I felt so much more comfortable and such a bigger connection. That's where I want to start this from, as a way to say that just because you can spend decades in a country doesn't mean that you're immune to failure and scams. If you can even call it a scam, but for me, I guess I could say that that was what it was. It all started with a backpacking holiday. I went with a group of 6 other lads. We were just doing Thailand initially, 3 months staying in little huts on the beach before the islands turned into the tourist conglomerates that they are today. Time spent on Khao San Road in Bangkok, a few little cheeky excursions to the bars of Pat Pong, where you entered a world that was so different to anything you'd seen before. To say I developed an addiction to the bars of Thailand would be the world's biggest understatement. For the lads that I was there with, it was a source of entertainment and intrigue. For me, it was a source of enlightenment and the most extreme form of exhilaration you could imagine. Growing up, I was always into extreme sports and the adrenaline that you got from taking part in them. The adrenaline you got from entering those little pieces of wonder in the heart of the city of Bangkok equaled the adrenaline you felt bombing down the mountainside on a bicycle, going over jumps as you went along, your heart pumping at breakneck speed. It wasn't an addiction that I was proud to have, but I embraced it. I even cherished it, because when I was there during that first holiday, it became everything I felt I would ever need in my life. The thought of this evolving and changing and becoming watered down over the years hadn't crossed my mind. It was perfect as it was, and I thought Thailand knew it was perfect as it was and would never change it. At the end of those 3 months, I didn't want to leave. I'd made so many memorable experiences, so much more to life than I knew back living at home I'd figured out after I was there. So I decided that I didn't really need to leave. I didn't have any commitments back home. I left university, got a job, and I was still living with my parents, which at the time was a lot less common than it is today for someone at my age. I was lucky that they had a big house and they barely noticed I was there, and I barely noticed they were there. So that was a benefit that I had at the time, where I had enough savings because I didn't need to pay for my own place. It meant I could stay in Thailand for an extra 6 months. That's what I was planning to do at first, just stay there for 6 months, soak in more of the culture, and try to develop a deeper connection. I was also harbouring secret ambitions that I would be able to find a job to teach English that would see me staying in the country forever. I wasn't a qualified teacher, but I did have a degree, and I wasn't the most stupid person in the world. I did very well at school, I got good grades, I did even better at university and got some of the highest marks. Yet, my intellect let me down when it came to women. I remember going to the airport with my mates and seeing them off, all of them thinking I'll be back in a few days because I wouldn't be able to hack it by myself. The thing was, I never returned. I went back for a week every now and then, and over the course of the decades I was in the country. But the most time I ever spent home was maybe 9 days when I had to go back for a funeral. Thailand was my world, my life, and the place I was meant to remain forever. I always thought it would be like that because it wasn't like I was unsuccessful during my time there. When my mates left, I had no intention right there and then to look for work as a teacher. I was going to go to some parts of the country that I'd never been to yet. I went north up into the mountains of Chiang Mai, down to Koh Samui and Koh Phangan, and I spent more time in Bangkok. At that moment in time, the money I had in savings, which wasn't a lot at home, stretched an awfully long way in Thailand. So money that you might have needed to use for a week at home, you could use for 2 months in Thailand. And at that age, I was just so excited to be there and see something different that I didn't need to spend money to try to give me something that I felt I was missing out on. I was good with everything Thai. The food, the accommodation, I didn't need air conditioning, and I was good with that, at least in the early stages. So after about 3 months had passed since my mates left, I was just spending as little money as I could, with the idea that instead of staying for 6 months, I could stay for a year if I continued spending at that rate. I actually found my way into a teaching job at a school on the outskirts of Bangkok. I did plan to look for a job, but I never got around to it. But when I was speaking to someone when I was out on Khao San Road one night, he told me he was an English teacher and he worked at the school and they were looking for another teacher. He told me to apply. I applied and the interview was very easy and basic. As long as I spoke English with an accent from a Western country and looked like I was from a Western country, that's all that seemed to matter. The interview didn't seem to care about my ability to teach English or about my background or anything. As long as I looked the part and spoke English, that was all that mattered. When I told my parents I managed to find a job, they were really annoyed and apprehensive about the thought of me staying in Thailand. They were still of the mind that that part of the world wasn't safe and that it was dangerous. Yet I was quickly understanding that even back then, all the Western notions about the country were false. The country was everything that I wanted from a country. The thought of having to go back and work in my own country was a thought that I didn't even want to entertain. And when I started working that job as an English teacher, life just moved forwards without me even knowing about it. I don't want to say how much, or should I say how little I was earning at that job, It did give me enough money to pay for a very basic room not too far away from the school. It also gave me enough money to eat the basic foods that you get in the local areas of the city. More importantly, it also gave me enough money to go out once or twice a week to treat myself to something a bit more Western and also to enjoy the nightlife scene, which, as I have already mentioned, became my addiction. When the 6 months was up that I planned to stay extra, I just stayed more. And it went from me working in that same job, doing the same things, and just really loving life. I had my fair share of girlfriends during that year. Some of them I met in the bars, some of them I didn't. And I just felt life was the best at that moment in time. I felt like I was solidifying my love of Thailand and my desire to remain in the country. I also thought that by doing that and learning Thai, eventually I would get to a point where Thailand was my country because it always felt like it was. I did another year at that same school. No increases of salary, nothing really to show from it apart from the ability to stay in Thailand and have a few good nights out a week. But back then, that was enough for me. The world didn't seem to be such a materialistic place as it is today. We didn't have the internet showing us how people lived in different countries, and I had no desire to go and look at different countries because Thailand was perfect. When I spoke to someone back home, it was on a landline telephone that you had to go and pay money to use at a specialist shop. It was different. The world was bigger, and I relished the fact that I was doing something so out of the ordinary that it didn't matter that I wasn't making very much money. That's what I think the differences are today. It felt like back then you had to be really brave. You had to take a leap into the unknown to be able to move to somewhere like Thailand. Yet today, all you have to do is watch a few videos, jump on a plane, and you're basically somewhere where you've watched videos about and you already know your way around. You might not have the atmosphere by watching, and it's not the same, but what I'm trying to say is that back then it felt more special than it does today. When I turned 28, I was still working at that school. I'd been there for around 2 years. I actually met someone who would become my first wife in Thailand. I always thought of her as the jewel of soy cowboy. I looked at girls that worked in the bars as the bridge between worlds, between the West where I was from and the Thailand where I wanted to be so badly. And I looked at them like they were the luckiest people the world had ever known. Perhaps not lucky financially or lucky by birth, but lucky that they were able to spend 12 hours a day in the places that I wanted to spend 24 hours a day in. And I thought by getting into a relationship, even a marriage with a girl like this, it would have meant that I had a little piece of the bars with me all the time, and then I could get myself out of that world. Not that I wanted to, but I knew I needed to if I wanted to progress in life and start to look outside of the bars. We got married after 6 months of meeting. 6 months later, she was pregnant and we had a son. It's when you have a child that you realise that the job you're doing is not acceptable and you need to do something else. I'd been working at that point for 3, maybe 4 years, and I think it's important to point out then, don't expect these dates to be 100% accurate. I'm just going back and reminiscing. If I'm off by a year here or there, then I think that's normal when we're talking about something from such a long time ago. I had a good degree, experience, and I was very presentable if I wanted to be. I decided it would be wise to apply to some of the international schools for a job, using my experience as well as my degree, although it wasn't related, just to see if I could get in the door and make more money and develop a real career. It was easier than I thought. When our son was 3 months old, I landed a job paying 2.5 times what I was earning at an international school in a better part of Bangkok. That allowed us to move to a place close to where all the action was, close to where I was working, yet I would only allow myself to go and enjoy the action once or twice a month. I called the next phase of my life the growing up phase. When I went from being a guy who would do anything just to stay in Thailand, to be the kind of person who would put in extra hours when they were given to me, the type of person who took on extra work doing private English lessons, and that allowed us to save money for the first time. It also meant that because I was working for that school, my son could go there for a considerably reduced rate, so he had the prospects of a great education in one of Bangkok's best schools for only a fraction of how much it would cost if I didn't work there. I considered that to be one of the biggest perks of the job, And I'm going to say that for the next 10 years of my life, the first 10 years of my son's life, and my wife's life at the time, that the school was my life. Great holidays, great memories, and buying my first condo in Bangkok, a 2-bedroom unit in the heart of the city. It was bigger than the ones they make today, but it was just perfect, and I felt like I was moving in the right direction in life. Let's just say that. I want to paint a picture of my finances. I would say I would be 38 by now, where in 2002 we have our own place, and I have a little bit of savings in the bank that could see me not working for 2 years if necessary. Those 10 years I worked the hardest I'd ever worked, and that's what allowed me to get the condo. You have to understand that they were cheaper back then and also bigger for what they were, but it felt like because we had that now, there was no rent to pay, and that meant I could work even harder and save even harder as well. Unfortunately, that was when my first marriage started to go wrong. After we met, she didn't really do anything. She was a stay-at-home mum. She took our son to school even though I worked there and I could have done that. And she was the one who went to pick him up and meet with the parents. She collected our son because I had to work an extra hour, and she took care of the condo. She did the shopping, and I thought she was content with what we had. She was from a small village in the northeast of Thailand, and we went there very occasionally. But at the time, at least, it wasn't a place that I wanted to spend any time in more than a courtesy visit. I thought that what she had, because she was with me, was so much better than what she had growing up, that any thoughts or dreams that she had were completely unwarranted. How much better do you want your status in life to be compared to how it was when you were growing up? I know I shouldn't have felt like that, but I did feel like that, because for me at least, I looked at my own position where I was in life. If I compared that to things I had growing up, I was worse off. My parents lived in a huge house, drove a nice car, and did everything that allowed me to have a great childhood. So the life I was living, although I loved it and really enjoyed it, I wasn't as financially well off as my parents. Yet for her, in comparison to what she had when she was growing up, she was in such a better position than when she was younger. It almost felt offensive to me that she started saying that it wasn't enough. The problem was, though, we got divorced. We had to sell the condo and split the money down the middle. That was gut-wrenching. That was my home and the place I actually planned to live in for a long time. Having to go back to renting again, this time having my son live with me, I was getting quite upset. It was awful, spending for rent, and she went her own way and left our son with me. If it was the other way round, I would have sent her money every month to help look after our son, but that wasn't her intention. She never sent any money to help support our son, so I went back into saving mode again for the next 5 years. I think that was when I could buy a new place for myself. I was working in Thailand, and with a business visa and work permit, and I saved up enough money to buy a condo, and that's the first time you're starting to think that Thailand doesn't really respect you. Because I was a foreigner, although I was allowed to own a condo, the money to buy it had to be sent from overseas. I was working in Thailand, and I'd spent at this point all those years in the country. I didn't have any money overseas, so I had to go through the crazy process of sending it overseas and then back again, and then they didn't have Wise at the time, so the cost was a lot higher. And that meant that when I finally had the condo again and it was mine, it cost me a lot just sending money back and forth. This time, no one could lay claim to it. It was the same building that I bought the one before in, and it was on a high floor and I could see all of Bangkok. At least all of the Bangkok that I loved the most, Lower Sukhumvit. I bought that condo when my son was 15, and I was still working at the same school. He was still able to take advantage of the great price that we could pay because I worked there, and he loved it. It was a 2-bedroom condo, a job I enjoyed, yet the feeling that there was more to life than this. I wasn't going to make any changes yet, though. I wanted my son to finish school and go off to university, and when he did finish school, we were fortunate that my parents agreed to pay for his university in England. I was fully aware that I was not going to get anything from them in terms of an inheritance. Although I was an only son, they were going to give most of their money away to charity. I know why they had these opinions, and it was because I went to Thailand. But they did agree to pay for my son's university, and they also bought him a house in England that he could live in. I wish they gave it to me so I could have rented it out and had some income, but I didn't care. I chose Thailand, and by choosing Thailand, I knew what that meant. I was fine with that, so I was very, very happy though that my son was going to have a little bit of benefit that many other people wouldn't have been fortunate enough to have. I didn't have it, and that was because I chose Thailand. But the fact that he was about to leave and go to England for the first time in his life, go to university, and he had his own house there, that was more than good enough to make up for me not getting anything. When he left for England, life changed again. I had my condo, I still had my job, and I had a few million baht in savings. This is the stage when you start to understand that I'm not going to be getting a pension from my own country because I never paid in. I haven't been paying into a private pension. So when you start thinking about how much money am I going to need to retire? I was around 46, give or take, when my son left for university. This was somewhere in 2010, and that was when I was starting to think about me for a change. I wanted to get to a point where I could retire because I never thought I would be working over the age of 50. I wasn't anywhere close though, and I actually started looking for a different job because I wasn't connected to the one anymore since my son left. I moved into working for a private language institution, and I somehow managed to muscle my way into being part owner of that place, and that gave me enough money over the next 5 years to give me another 8 million baht saved up. That was hard work and a very lucky stage in my life. I never thought that I was making this extra money for any other reason that I was in the right place at the right time and that I was lucky. I get that you have to be in it to win it, but you can be in it and never win it. So I always think luck and being in the game, that made me have that part of my life. I was 51 in 2015, about 10 million baht saved up, and a condo I lived in. And because I lived in Thailand for such a long time, I knew exactly how much money I spent and how much I could live on. That's when I started to work out that if I spent 500,000 baht for a year for 20 years, that would take me all the way to 71. That could be enough to retire. And this was when I first started to think about it. I know that if you're living in a country such as America, there are so many investment vehicles that you can put your money in to give you a % return. In England, it's the same. Yet in Thailand, it's not very similar. Even when the interest rates are high in terms of what the actual interest rate is, what the bank pays you, even for a 5-year fixed, is very low. Sometimes as little as 2%, and it's not worth it. When it comes to investing, they don't have the same kind of things as they do in the West. So it's not like I could have just parked that 10 million into something and got 6 or 7% a year, because that simply didn't exist in Thailand. I don't even think it exists today. Or if it does exist, I'm not aware of it. So that's something I want to say. I could get at the most 2%, and that wouldn't have been enough. I could have invested the money overseas and done it that way, I guess, because 6% of 10 million would have been 600,000 a year, and that would have maintained the money. Yet as far as I was concerned, I was living in Thailand. Thailand was my country. Thailand was where I wanted to be, and I wanted to have my things in Thailand. So I wasn't overly concerned about my money going down because, for a start, I didn't really need to leave any to my son because he was already taken care of. So that's why I was thinking just use the money slowly over time. Of course, you would put 8 million into a 2% interest rate account and then leave some money for your living expenses, so you would still be getting something, but it wasn't enough to make the money not go down. This is what I was thinking when I was 51. Remember, because that was when I was eligible for retirement extension, and even though I'd spent all those years in the country, it didn't mean much of anything if it wasn't like you could get a certain number of years and then here you go, you don't need to renew your visa again. It doesn't work like that in Thailand. So I was thinking the retirement visa could be a good option, but I did continue working. I found a different job and did another 2 years, and I managed to add an extra million baht to my savings, and then I thought I had enough. 53 years old, 11 million baht, a condo I owned that I could live in, and it was time for me to just kick back, relax, and enjoy everything about Thailand that I used to enjoy before life got in the way. I guess that takes us to around 2014. My condo was in such a great location that I could just walk to the bars of Bangkok, and that's what my life became after I quit the last job. You have to remember that in 2014, that part of Bangkok wasn't like it is today. It wasn't as popular with people who weren't your traditional Thailand tourist. It was still relatively affordable, With the money that I had to spend, working out I was getting 2% on certain bits of it, I guessed I could have spent 600,000 baht a year to live on. That would mean my money would never run out until I did. And in 2014, that was a good amount of money. I was open to the possibility of getting into another relationship, and it was that year that I did meet a girl, this time at a bar in Nana Plaza. And for some reason, it felt like I was starting my Thailand adventure all over again. I'd spent so long in Thailand that it wasn't uncommon to see Thai guys with younger Thai girls. You saw it everywhere, and it was an extremely normal part of the culture. You might see that from time to time in your own country, but in Thailand it was really in your face, and you saw it all the time. So you can forgive foreigners for going and doing the same thing because that's what everyone seems to do anyway. I sort of felt in the moment like it was my life all over again. I had a start and I was able to start again from the beginning. So when I got into the relationship with her, even though she was 30 years younger than I was, I relished the fact that it was time for me to start over from the beginning. At this point, I could speak, I wouldn't say perfect Thai, but it was the next best thing. And I thought I knew the country and everything about it. I thought that because I'd been in Thailand for such a long time, I would be looked at not just like another foreigner, and I thought that I would be respected for that fact and not taken advantage of. When I met her, it was like a match made in heaven. She was from Buriram, and I'd been there at least 5 times before. I'd been all over Thailand, and when you're speaking to girls and they say where they're from and you say you've been there, you felt like they respected you more than the guys who were just there on a 2-week holiday. I found her moving into my condo not long after we met, and life was good. I hadn't been in a serious relationship since I got divorced from my first wife. I was concentrating, make sure my son had the best. But now it was time for me, and I wanted to start from scratch. So when I met her, I wanted things to move fast. What would follow would be a series of bad decisions, lost money, incredibly stupid decisions, and the realization that although I spent most of my life in Thailand, although I could speak the language, I didn't really have any firm connection to the country of Thailand because it didn't work like that. What happened shattered the Thailand illusion for me. I'd been under the spell of Thailand for decades, and when the spell was finally starting to wear off, I already knew it was too late to have another go. After she lived with me for 3 months, we got married. We went to do the ceremony in her village. I'd done that once before, so I knew everything about what it was like. I knew how things worked in Thailand, and when I met her, I talked about my disapproval of Sinsot and how there was no way I was ever going to pay something like that, and I didn't. I actually thought that her family respected me more because of it. I wasn't about to play that game. I did pay for everything, and I did give her parents a little bit of money for something else, but it wasn't directly for that, and I felt great because of it. If you can remember me talking about not wanting to live somewhere like that, when I was getting on in years, it was starting to feel more appealing. I loved where I was living in Bangkok, I loved my condo, but I was at least in the moment drawn to rural Thailand in a way like I never thought I would be. I wasn't talking about this with my wife then, I wasn't putting plans in place to do anything, but it's the first time I started to have visions about the place that made me think having a big house in a peaceful location would be a great place to live out my latter years. I had spoken to so many people over the years who had built in rural Thailand. I knew that there was a big risk with it, but I also knew people who had lived there for years and who have never had problems. There seemed to be 2 sides to the coin, people who were okay somewhere like that and people that weren't. While the people that weren't okay significantly outnumbered the people who were, I felt that by me having such a deep connection to the country of Thailand, this was a false assumption because I thought I would be okay based on that fact. I didn't realize anything else at the time. I thought I would have a lot better chance of success. Because I could speak Thai, I could speak to everyone in the village. I could have conversations with them about anything, and I thought that would make things easier for me. But after marrying, we returned to Bangkok and just got on with the existence of living. The thing that I didn't bargain on when I stopped working was that I would get bored. Boredom sets in very quickly, and then I was finding myself going to the beach for a weekend, then going away for a week somewhere, going on a motorcycle trip sometimes, and I'm doing all this with my wife, but I'm not able to do it within the budget that I'd set for myself if I wanted to never have problems. In order to do that, I would have probably needed 3 times as much money if I wanted to do this actively all the time. It's strange when you get to the point of retirement and you think that not doing anything at all is all you've ever wanted to do, but it's not. All you've ever wanted to do is what you want to do without running out of money. I didn't have enough to do that. Not only that, when you're bored, it makes you make bad decisions, and that's something that I regret as well. I'd been with my wife for about a year, and I'd probably spent $1 million extra during that year than I should have done, and that was just to make sure I wasn't bored. I tried all kinds of different hobbies that were cheaper, but I didn't like things like that. I wasn't okay going to the driving range and playing golf for an hour or two. I could have done that within budget, but that wasn't me. Something that I wanted to do was go to the beach and stay in a nice hotel and really love life. And I quickly found out that I simply wasn't able to do that, and if I wanted to, I needed to make more money. You never think that the idea of making more money is going to cost you everything you have. But at the time, I just wanted to do something. I desperately wanted to do something, but the thing is, I just didn't know what to do. I had all kinds of ideas, maybe going up to the village where my wife was from and having a house there and a business there. And of course, because it's so much cheaper than where we were living now, we'd save money. That was one of the thoughts I spent a long time thinking about. I thought about if we did that, I could also rent out my condo and have an income from it. But then I also thought about selling the condo and using that for a place in the village and a business. I thought about moving to another part of the country altogether. I thought about so many things that I spent years thinking about what I was going to do, and I was still doing all the things I shouldn't have been doing just to not be bored. I was blowing through my retirement money quite quickly, together with my wife, into 2015, 2016, 2017. I spent a big chunk of money that I shouldn't have spent because I wasn't being sensible. And it was only when 2018 came around that I really had to have a strong conversation with myself and say, you've got enough to last you, but you can't keep doing this. But the problem was, I wasn't happy when I wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing. But in 2018, that's when I decided that I was going to sell my condo, and once it was sold, we could decide what to do from there. It took a long time to sell my condo, but because that was what I was doing, I knew that the end was in sight, and it would sell. So I was happy to just continue with the lifestyle and worry about things when it sold. It took all the way until the end of 2019 for it to sell. I guess I was really lucky that it sold then because COVID would have meant I probably wouldn't have been able to sell it for years after and the price might have gone down. But I released the money from that, and that was when we decided that we were actually going to go and live by the beach. If we lived by the beach, we wouldn't have to pay for hotels at the beach, and I could have that lifestyle. So we set off with the idea of going to Koh Samui. We arrived, and a few months later, everything happens with COVID, and it didn't seem like we wanted to be there, so that was when we decided to go to her village. We didn't have anywhere to live in her village, but in the town, we did find somewhere to rent, and while it was quite a long way from the village, I guess that means that we were actually living in Buriram city. I don't know why it felt like we wanted to live there more than on the island, it just seemed right. At this point, I got rid of the condo. I spent more money than I should have done on lots of things, and I guess I had around 10 million baht in total. One of the problems was, as usually is the case, you develop things that you love in Thailand, and ripping yourself away from them is hard. That's why, if I'm being truthful, we went to Buriram as well, because I had to rip myself away from everything I loved about Thailand in order to try to salvage my retirement in Thailand. Throughout the first 6 months of COVID, we spent a lot of time thinking. I came to the decision that I wanted to build in the village and open a small shop that sold things such as fertilizer, farm supplies, and other bits and pieces. Because I could speak Thai, I was able to know where to buy things from in order to sell them, and while there were other shops that did that, I thought it would be great for my wife to have something to do as well. I think I overestimated the importance of speaking Thai, because ultimately it didn't help at all. But the reasoning behind this was to get stuck into something very different. It was cheaper. That was also the thing I wanted to do. And also to try to bring in a regular income, even if it was only a small one, to supplement what I had left. Throughout COVID, we did buy some land, we built a house, we bought some more land and built a shop, and stocked the shop with everything that we wanted to sell. The shop opened halfway through 2022, and in terms of savings, I put just over half into everything. I had about 4 million baht left, but that sounded like it was more than enough because I was expecting the shop to bring in a little bit of money every month. I wasn't expecting a lot, somewhere around 20,000 baht, and that would have been realistic, yet I wasn't exactly sure how things would go. When I heard stories around this time and throughout the entire time I was in Thailand of people who moved there and built a house in the village, I used to think that the guys in the stories were stupid. I thought that because they hadn't spent a lot of time in the country, they weren't aware of the nuances that went along with living in Thailand. They weren't aware of the cultural differences and how people did things so differently in the village as opposed to the city. I thought that they were going to not get the proper overall picture of Thailand and how it looked. They generated these feelings and expectations because of that. They built a picture in their mind based on being there for such a short amount of time that ultimately they were destined to fail because when they came to the understanding about what it was really like, it was too late. Because I'd spent such a long time in Thailand, I thought I was going in with my eyes opened to what Thailand is like. I'd been there for so long that I thought that because I was doing it with the experience of 30 years in the country. That's why I did it. That's why I thought I was different to the other guys who had failed there, because I wasn't going to fail, because Thailand was my country just as much as it was everybody else's who lived there. These were still my thoughts, yet I didn't have any right to live in the country. I just had a temporary right to stay there that had been extended for 35 years. But I felt that it was my time to do something in my country. The shop opened and it did bring in money. My wife worked there and that was her thing, but it wasn't making as much as I wanted it to, but I'd say we averaged about 12,000 baht a month, and that, together with the money I had, I thought was going to be okay. Didn't spend a lot of money living in the village, which was the main reason for going there, but also it was just a different lifestyle, and I was looking for something that I could enjoy that didn't mean I needed to spend money. The shop was open for about 6 months. I'm happy with the way it's going, and because we don't have any expenses that go along with it, it didn't seem to be a problem and it was making a small profit. I think I might have been too happy with how things were going because I decided that when my wife said she wanted to open another business, it only seemed right that we should try. We bought another piece of land and we dug 3 enormous fish ponds. If you've been to rural Thailand, you've probably seen them. And this was meant to be the kind of business where you went to buy small fish, you bought thousands of them, you put them in one pond, and when they got to a certain size, you moved them to the next one, and you bought more small ones, and throughout that time, you had fish at various stages of development in the different ponds. I probably put 1 million baht into that business, expecting that it would go according to plan. We employed someone to look after the business for us, but one day, when I went to go and have a look, all the fish were dead. I learned that there was something in the water that caused this, but I'm still not sure what it was. But that was very difficult to take because I put all that money into it, and while we still had the land, now it's a question of, hang on, at this rate my money's going to run out in 5 years. That's when I doubled down, investing into something else. You see people all the time around cities, pushing around carts or driving a motorcycle with cooking facilities attached, and they sold street food. I had the idea, which I thought was amazing, that instead of having one of these and selling noodles or whatever you would sell from them, we could have our own branding and our own franchise and sell this to other people to go and sell things. I thought that we could sell a franchise for 30,000 baht. It might cost us 10,000 baht to make everything, so we could make 20,000 baht and 5% of their sales. If we could get 2 people signing up a month, then we're going to be making some money. And also, we're going to be having a good time of it and building a recognizable brand. Perhaps that was me trying to live the life that I always thought I was going to live before I actually got to Thailand. I always thought I was going to be in business. I thought I was going to be a great success and make millions of pounds. That's what my life was destined to be. I had the support of my parents behind me, yet as soon as I found Thailand, my parents didn't approve. I gave everything to Thailand and I never really followed the life path that I expected to follow. That's why when I came up with this idea, I thought it was the best thing I'd ever put money into. I imagined having hundreds of people around the country selling our brand of whatever it is we were selling. I envisaged making hundreds of thousands of baht a month, and then having the village as a base and little bases all over the country. Everyone has dreams. Everyone thinks big. Yet not many people actually go ahead and try and grab it. I thought I would, and I thought it was going to work. It didn't work. I should have known. I put 2 million baht into that business, and now, with my wife still running the shop, understanding that money's going down and there's not much money left. How convenient the time it was for her to decide she was going to cheat on me with her old boyfriend from the village. That's when you realise that village life for a foreigner in Thailand is something that nobody should do. Let me put it to you this way. Even if I could own the house, even if I could own the land it was on, even if the rules meant that I had rights to live in the country indefinitely, and I didn't need to leave because of a visa, even if all that was true and I divorced my wife, would I still want to live in that house, on that land, even if it belonged to me and I could legally live there? Would I still want to live in her village? No, I wouldn't. That's the thing that I never thought about when I went into it, and my life was just going downhill rapidly, and by 2024 the writing was on the wall. Things going very badly with my wife, no money, no prospects for retirement I thought of. I put all my money into a business that I thought was going to be great, but it wasn't, and I'm of the age where I really don't want to go back and work at a school again. That was something that I thought about for a long time. I was even offered a position at a school that would have paid me 80,000 baht a month. The problem was, while that would have been enough money for me to live in Bangkok by myself, where was I going to get any money to save from to retire at some point? I could have worked forever, but I didn't want to do that. I got divorced from my wife, though, when it became apparent that her old boyfriend was a lot more appealing than I was. Because of that, I lost all my investments there. The fall from grace was rapid and soul-destroying, and I was in Bangkok with about 500,000 baht in the bank, deciding, do I go back to work and hope for a miracle? Or do I go back to the country I was from and somehow try to get some kind of state help? I know technically you're not meant to, if you've lived abroad for a long time, get state assistance, but they're not going to leave me with nothing. If I worked for 10 more years and I saved 20,000 baht a month, that would have been 2.4 million. That wouldn't have been enough for me to retire on, and I'd be well into my 60s. So ultimately, I had to come to the decision that I should swallow my pride and return to the country where I was from, that I hadn't lived in for over 30 years. My son put me up in his house that my parents had given him. If I'd stayed in England, I'd have had so much more if I'd just toed the line and done what my parents wanted me to do. But I didn't, and I had to accept that. I was able to receive financial assistance from the government, and that's what I live on. It's night and day different to how life was back in Thailand. I miss Thailand all the time, but I made some stupid decisions, and I suppose I deserve to be in this position even though I hate being where I am. I think it's very interesting because my retirement visa just expired about 2 months ago. I guess I've been back for a long time now, but not so long that it feels like a long time. 7 or 8 months maybe. My retirement visa expired, and my extension of stay therefore expired. And if I was to go to Thailand again, even after spending over 35 years in the country, I would be starting from scratch, just the same as if somebody who arrived in the country at the same time as me, who had never been there before, had to start. That is the most difficult part of everything. Those 35 years mean nothing in the eyes of the Thai government. I'm still just a foreigner. I'm still just a Farang. And that's what I would always have been. Thailand offers so many amazing and wonderful things. It gave me a great life, up until it didn't, but it didn't give me any sense of security. It didn't give me any sense of belonging, and it didn't make me feel like I was part of anything. Understanding that if I won the lottery and went back to Thailand, I would arrive in the country and go to immigration, and they would give me a 30-day stamp just like everyone else. That's sick. There's no two ways about it. And if I felt like I felt now, back when I went to Thailand originally, I would never have accepted such bad treatment by people who didn't even want me there in the first place.